In this video, I'm going to show you how to build one of my favorite AI marketing automations. This automation here scans Reddit 24/7 to find posts where someone asks a question or mentions a problem that your business can solve. For example, one of my clients consults people on international health insurance. And let's say someone asks a question about his topic on Reddit. For example, this post right here. Does anyone have recommendations for international health insurance in Mexico? As soon as this post was created, the automation immediately saw it and notified my client so that he could go and leave a helpful reply below the post with a little bit of self-promotion at the end. And I do this for my own software business as well. Whenever someone mentions a problem on Reddit that my software can solve, I immediately get a notification and then I can write a helpful comment below the post that also promotes my software in a non-pushy way. So you can see this works for all different types of industries. And it is extremely effective because lots of people will see the posts, but then also read the comments below that post and this way discover your business. And keep in mind, Reddit posts have an extremely high chance of ranking in Google search results. And when that happens, these posts will be visible for multiple years, and then people can also discover these posts and read your comments below it, and this way also find your business. And now I'm going to show you step by step how you can build this in n8n. So let's get started. Okay, here I am inside n8n, and keep in mind the setup now for this automation is going to take you about 1 to 2 hours. But afterwards you don't really have to touch it again and it'll just do its job automatically. If you don't want to build this automation completely from scratch and save some time, I have also created this workflow here as a template, which you can just import into your own n8n account. I'll put a link to that in the video description. And in this template, I've added this configuration node here in the beginning. And this configuration node contains all of the important settings for the automation, which means you can just change these placeholders here for your own use case. So with the template, you can save a little bit of time, but you can also just follow the tutorial now and you'll get there as well. It'll just take you a bit longer. Okay, the first thing that we have to add to this automation is a trigger, and I'm going to search for the schedule trigger because I want to run this automation once every 4 hours to check the new posts from the past 4 hours on Reddit. So I'm going to call this every 4 hours. The trigger interval, I set that to hours, and the hours between the triggers is 4. Okay. And then we have to fetch the latest post from Reddit. And for that, I add a Reddit node. And the action that we're looking for is called get many posts. We need to set up a credential to connect n8n with Reddit. I'm going to show you how to do this in a minute. Let's first of all focus on all of the other fields here. Resource, post, operation, get many, we leave that as is. And now we get to a very important field, which is the subreddit. Now, the way Reddit works is that it's made up of all types of different communities or subforums within Reddit, and they are called subreddits. And you'll find a subreddit for almost any topic. As you can see, there's one about gaming, music, food, art, sports, and so on and so forth. And your task now is you have to find a subreddit that is relevant to your business's topic. So for example, if your business has something to do with video editing, then ideally you search for a subreddit called video editing. Or if your business has something to do with consulting about a certain software, let's say you're a consultant for Airtable or Google Sheets, then you would look for the Airtable subreddit. For this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate the entire setup with a community called expats because I'm going to stick to the international health insurance example of my client that I mentioned in the beginning. Once you found a relevant community or a relevant subreddit, make sure that self-promotion as part of commons is not explicitly forbidden in these rules. Actually, lots of subreddits allow self-promotion, but they have some restrictions on it. So make sure that you follow the rules of the individual subreddit. Then just copy the name of this subreddit without the r/ in front of it. Just copy the name, in my case expats, and back inside n8n you paste the name of the subreddit into this field. Return all, we leave that checked off, and the limit 100 we can leave that as is. And we have to add a filter here, and we filter by the category of new posts because we only want to get the latest posts from Reddit. And let's also call this node get latest Reddit posts. And now we have to set up the credential. We have to connect n8n with Reddit. And to do that, you just click on here and you click on Create New Credential. Now we need to fill out the client ID and the client secret. Now, where do you get that from? You get that from the link reddit.com/prefs/apps. And this only works if you have a Reddit account. So if you don't have a Reddit account, then quickly create one and then log into it. And once you're logged into your Reddit account and open this link, you'll get to this page. And there's a button, Are you a developer? Create an app, and you just click on it. The name of the app, you call this whatever you want. It's not that important. Maybe something like n8n connection. And for the type of app, I usually choose script, but it is not really that important. Description about URL, you can just leave that empty. The redirect URL, you get that from n8n. This is this one here, OAuth redirect URL. Just copy it and paste that in here, and then confirm that you're not a robot and create the app. Once you've done that, the app will show up here. And now you need to copy two things. First of all, this cryptic string up here. This is the client ID. You paste that in here. And then this cryptic string down here, the secret, you copy that and paste it in here. And then the button shows up, Connect my account. And I just allow this connection. And now it says connection successful, and everything should work as expected. Let's close this and give it a try. I'm going to execute this step. And the node executes and it returns the latest 100 posts from Reddit. So our connection works properly. Now, the problem that I have with this response here, yes, we get the latest 100 items or posts from Reddit, but you can see these posts include a lot of data. So all of this data here is about one single post, and we do not need all of that data. We only need the most important pieces of data, like the title or the content of the post, but not all of the other stuff. Which is why after this node, I'm going to add a set node, and we're going to use that to simplify the post data. Let's call this post info. And here I will now just extract the most important pieces of information. Make sure that you're in the schema view here. And then first of all, search for the ID of the post. We'll need that. And I drag that into this field here. And this automatically creates a field in the set node. And I rename this to post ID. Then the title. There it is. I just drag this into this field again, and this automatically creates the title field. The content of the post is actually not called content by Reddit, but it's called self-text. So I search for self-text and also drag that in here. But then I rename this to content. Let's keep going. We also need the subreddit from where the post was created, in our case expats, but I want to pull that dynamically from this response. So I also create a field for that here. And then we need two more things. First of all, the link to the post, so that later when our AI analyzes a post and says, oh, this is actually suitable to write a self-promotional comment, that we have a link where we can open it so that we can start to write the comment. For that, I'm going to search for the permalink, and I drag that in here. The problem with this permalink is that it only includes the last part of the link and not the domain part. Which is why, first of all, let's rename this to link. And then in front of this permalink expression, I'm going to add https://reddit.com. And then we can see now we have the full clickable and valid URL. We now need a final field because we also need the time when the post was created, which is why I search for created. And there we have this field called created UTC, and I drag that into here. And rename that to created time. Let's execute this. And you can see now we have all of the post data, but in a much more simpler way. And now it's going to be much easier for us to work with that data. Now, there's two more small optimizations that I would like to make here. First of all, I would like to limit the amount of characters that a post can have. Because some Reddit posts, they can be super long. And usually these super long posts are quite spammy, and if we feed these insanely long posts later into our AI, this can get a bit expensive. So I want to protect myself against that. Which is why after the self-text, I add a dot slice and then parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, I write 0,4000. And all this does is it says, if the post is shorter than 4,000 characters, then just keep it as it is. But if it is longer than 4,000 characters, then only keep the first 4,000 characters and remove everything else. Then I would also like to add a second thing here. Sometimes on Reddit it can happen that a post has no text or no content at all, but instead someone has posted an external link to an external website. And for this case, I will add a fallback operator here. And that means if the post content is empty, I instead want to use the URL that the user has posted as the value for this content field. And that is basically what this fallback operator does. It looks at the first value, checks if it's empty. If it's not empty, it just keeps it as it is and ignores everything else. But if it is empty, then it will choose this as the final value. Now, if you don't yet fully understand why I was able to do this here with the dot slice and the fallback operator, and would like to learn more about these technical aspects of n8n, then feel free to check out my course that I've created called Technical n8n Simplified, where I basically teach you all of these technical fundamentals about n8n, including these advanced expressions completely from scratch. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the video description. Okay, but this will work just like that, and we can execute it, and you can see we still get our simplified data. Now we have to add a really interesting node, which is the date and time node, because we have to now determine the age of a post, so that in the next steps we can then remove all posts older than 4 hours because they were already checked in the last execution of our automation. So let's add this, and the action here is we want to get the time between dates. And I call this get post age. The start date, let's turn that into an expression. And the value for the start date is going to be the created time. And the end date, I also turn that into an expression and then write double curly brackets and $now. This gets the current time. And basically the age of the post is the difference between when the post was created, the created time, and right now. And let's call this post age. And the units here, I want to choose hour. I want the post age in hours. Let's execute this. And you can see now for each post, we get the post age in hours, which is very useful because then we can, in the next step, add a filter node. And this filter node has the task to remove all posts older than 4 hours, which is why I'm going to give it a name, remove posts older than 4 hours. And the condition for that is that the post age in hours, so I just drag this value in this first field, and then number is less than 4. So if it's younger than 4 hours, then we keep the posts, and in all other cases, we filter it out. So let's try this out. Let's execute this. And as you can see, only 3 posts out of the latest 100 were created in the past 4 hours. Okay, and now it's going to get really interesting because we're going to add our first AI step into this automation. Now, before we get to that AI step, I would like to ask you for a small favor. If you enjoyed this type of video where I give you a detailed walkthrough of automations, then don't forget to like this video because that signals to me that you want to see more of this type of content, and then I can produce more videos like this in the future. Okay, and now it's going to get really interesting because we're going to add our first AI step into this automation. And for that, I'm going to click plus here. And the AI step I'm going to add here is called the basic LLM chain. Now, this is just essentially a generalized version of an AI text prompt. So you might be familiar with these Google Gemini or OpenAI message a model nodes. And this right here is exactly the same, except that we can add any model, any AI model down here that we want. So that's why I use the basic LLM chain. So let's open this up. The first thing I do is the source for the prompt. I turn that into define below so that we can write our prompt here. And then I add a prompt here, the system prompt, where we can give the AI instructions for what it has to do. And let's click here on expression and open this up. And I paste the following system prompt inside here. And I'm now going to walk you through this prompt step by step so that you can adjust it for your own use case. If you're working with the template, obviously you will have access to this prompt. If you're not working with the template, I'll quickly zoom out a bit so that you can take a screenshot of this entire text here, and then you can just copy the text out of the screenshot and then paste it into your own automation. Okay, let's go through this. You are a marketing research assistant for my company. My company's main offer is an insurance brokerage and consulting called n8n. So this first sentence just describes the type of offer and the name. You adjust this part with the type of your own offer. If you have a software, you write my company's main offer is a software or an online shop or a consulting or an agency or whatever. And then here the name of this offer. The next sentence is a brief description of this offer. Here I wrote, n8n is an insurance broker which assists expats, international employees and travelers in finding international health insurance. Then you have to write something about the main use cases and problems that your offer solves. In this case, I wrote insurance for expats, insurance for employees worldwide, short-term and long-term international health insurance, travel insurance, all types of international health insurance, and so on and so forth. Then the next section is about the most important features or information about your offer. You just write a couple of bullet points. In this case, I wrote free consulting, assisting with insurance of families, independent recommendations, assisting getting insurance with pre-existing conditions, and finding the best insurance provider for each individual situation. Then the instructions for what the AI has to do. Your task is to analyze Reddit posts from the whatever subreddit the post is from. We pulled that dynamically from our post info data to identify self-promotion opportunities. And then the description. A post is suitable for self-promotion if it allows for a natural mention of our insurance brokerage and consulting, n8n, in a helpful reply, meaning a comment on the post. And it is related to the use cases which our insurance brokerage and consulting is relevant for or to the problems it solves. So here you just replace this insurance brokerage and consulting twice with your own type of offer, and then obviously also the name again. I will also provide you with a few relevant examples. And here at the end, this is basically just an instruction for the output format that we want the AI to respond in. So we want to respond with an object that says suitable for reply, yes or no, and then an explanation why it chose yes or no. And then here in the user prompt, this is going to be very simple. We just give the AI the post data. So let's turn that into an expression as well. And I write post title. And I drag in from the post info step the title. Then I write post content. And then from the post info step, I drag in the content of the post. Okay, let's rename this to classify posts. And then finally, we have to add an AI model here. Now, what you can do here is you can add your own AI model. For example, if you work with OpenAI, you just choose the OpenAI chat model. And then here, I recommend to choose a smart AI model. For example, GPT-5 would work very well here. And then you have to select response format, JSON. That is really important. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work with OpenRouter. And OpenRouter is basically a service that allows you to use any available AI model through a single account. So I select OpenRouter here. And for the model, I'm going to choose Gemini 2.5 Pro, which is a really good AI model from Google. And I also add the option here, response format. Set it to JSON. If you would like to know more about OpenRouter and how it works and what the advantages are, then feel free to check out the video that I've recorded about this on my YouTube channel. But otherwise, you can just also work with OpenAI or the Google Gemini node directly, and then this should also work exactly the same. Okay, let's execute this. And you can see node executed successfully. And we get a response of 3 items. And we can see, yes, the AI received 3 posts that it analyzed, and it responded with a evaluation if the posts are suitable for self-promotion, yes or no, and an explanation why. Now, what I don't like about this, we get the AI response here with the yes and no and an explanation, but the problem is it's quite hard to see which post led to this AI analysis. Which is why what I like to do in this case, after the AI node, I'll add a set node. This is a common pattern that you can use in all types of different AI automations. And here, I'm going to call this post classification data. And in here, I will add a couple of fields. First of all, I will add evaluation and then square brackets and suitable for reply in double quotes. And then I pull that in here. I will add another field, evaluation.explanation. I drag in the explanation response from the AI. And then I will add the post.title. And here I drag in the title from the post info step. And I will add a field called post.content. And I drag in the content of the post info step as well. And if I now execute this and switch to the table view, now we have the different evaluations, so the different AI responses with yes or no and an explanation. But on the right side, we now have the post that was actually evaluated that led to this response. So it's much easier to see what the AI did. For example, this post right here, looking for a change, led to this AI evaluation. Now, the problem with this current setup is that all posts that are posted in this subreddit will be sent to this AI step here. And as we use a smart model here to get a really good analysis, this could get quite expensive because we have to analyze every single post. Which is why I'm going to use a method called AI pre-filtering. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a much cheaper AI model and put it in front of the more expensive one. And the task of this cheaper AI model is to look at the posts and pre-categorize them. So it checks if the post falls within the general topic that we are looking for. In my case, that is insurance. And if the post has nothing to do with insurance, then we don't even have to bother sending it to the more expensive AI model to analyze if it's suitable for self-promotion. And this way we can remove about 70 to 90% of posts that are obviously not going to be relevant for us. And this way, this more expensive AI has much less work to do, and we can save about 80 to 90% of automation costs. Okay, so for this, I will add another basic LLM chain. And let's call this AI pre-filter. I switch the source for the prompt to define below so that we get our user prompt again. And down here, I add a system prompt, which I turn into an expression. And then I open this up and then I paste this prompt right here. Again, if you're working with the template, then you already have access to this. If not, you can just screenshot this and then copy the text out of this screenshot. Okay, let's do a quick walkthrough here because you also have to adjust this to your own use case. You are a Reddit post classification expert. Your task is to look at a post from the whatever subreddit the post is from that I give you, and you have to say if this post has something to do with the topic of insurance. So that is the general topic that I'm looking for. You have to replace this with your own broad or general topic that you're looking for. This could be topics like travel insurance, international health insurance, international car insurance, insurance for posted workers, expat insurance, and so on and so forth. So I basically just give a couple of subtopics or example so that the AI gets some idea of what I'm looking for. And then your task is to look at a post and then respond with a JSON object of the following format. And then again, we want to have a response which says is related to our general topic, yes or no, and then an explanation why the AI chose yes or no. And you can see this is quite a simple prompt here, and we want to keep it simple because we are using a very cheap AI model here, which is also not going to be super smart. And so we want to keep the instructions as simple as possible. Now for the user prompt, we can actually copy the user prompt from this classify posts node because it's exactly the same. We just want to feed the post itself into this user prompt. And then we also have to add a model here. And again, you can work with OpenAI. If you work with OpenAI, then I recommend to you to use GPT-5 Nano or GPT-5 Mini. And then also set the response format to JSON. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work with OpenRouter again. And again, if you don't understand OpenRouter and want to learn more about it, I've already recorded a video about this on this YouTube channel. Model here, I'm going to choose Gemini again. but this time not 2.5 Pro, but 2.5 Flash Lite, which is a very affordable model by Google, but it still has an acceptable level of intelligence, let's say it this way. And I also set the response format from text to JSON. Okay, let's try this out. I'm going to execute this pre-filter step. And you can see the AI pre-filter looked at all of these posts and decided, no, none of them is related to the general topic that we are looking for. And in this case, none of these posts would have ended up here with the more expensive model, and we would have saved a lot of money. One thing that I would like to mention, if in your case, you don't have any posts that get to this step because, for example, in the past 4 hours, no posts have been created in your subreddit, this can definitely happen, then what you could do is you could just go into this node. Then what you can just do is you can just deactivate this node during testing, and then all of these posts from the beginning steps will be sent to the AI steps. And this way you will always have enough posts to run your AI steps with during testing because they don't get removed here. And once you finish building the entire automation, then you can just activate this here again. Okay, now to remove these posts that the AI pre-filter categorized as not related to our topic, we actually have to add a filter node here because the AI node itself cannot do that. And I call this filter node remove non-relevant posts. And the condition for that is that the AI response is related is equal to yes. Only then we want to keep it, and in all other cases we want to remove the posts. Let's make this look a little nicer, and let's save the automation as well so that we don't lose our progress. All right, so now we have a very basic first version of this automation. The problem is, the way it is right now, it is still going to make a lot of mistakes. I can tell you that from experience when setting up this automation for myself and also for other people. The main problem is that this node here, this classify post node, is going to make mistakes. That means in some situations it's going to categorize a post as no, not suitable for self-promotion, that would actually be very suitable for a self-promotional comment, and also vice versa. And the big question is, why is this happening? Because after all, we're using a very smart model here, Google Gemini 2.5 Pro, or if you went with OpenAI, GPT-5. Both of these models are capable of solving PhD level math problems, so the intelligence of the models cannot be the issue. The issue is the model, all the information it has to work on this task is our prompt here. And the second part of this prompt is basically just about the format that we want the AI to respond in. So basically these few paragraphs are everything the AI has to work on this task. So how could we improve this? Let's say you gave this task to a human, and the human had the task to look at all new Reddit posts from this subreddit and then classify them as suitable for self-promotion, yes or no. And then you look at the results of that human and you realize, okay, in about 70 to 80% of the cases, he gets it right or she gets it right. And in about 20% of the cases, they make a mistake. And the way to improve the human results is just to give that human some examples so that that person could make better decisions or better post classifications. And then the success rate would suddenly go from 80% to 95 or 98%. And the cool thing is we can do the exact same thing with the AI. Which is why in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to teach you a method that you can use to provide relevant examples to your AI automations. And you can use this method to optimize this automation here, but you can also use this for all types of other AI automations that you built. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're doing right now. At the moment, we are using this strategy that I call prompt only, the prompt only approach. What we do is we take a Reddit post and then we feed that Reddit post into our AI alongside some instructions. And then based on that, the AI has to decide if the post is suitable for self-promotion, yes or no. The first step that we could take to improve that would be to add some examples into this prompt. So I call this second approach prompt plus static examples. So in this case, we would feed the Reddit post into the prompt, but also a list of example posts that we have already labeled ourselves as yes, suitable for self-promotion, or no, this type of post is not suitable for self-promotion. So right here, this could be how these examples could look like. I have created this table inside of Airtable, but you could also use Google Sheets for that. And each row inside of this database has the example post with a title of the post and the content of the post. And then I've added my personal decision if that post is suitable for reply, yes or no, and then an explanation why I chose yes or no here. And then we could just take this entire list, and whenever we analyze a new post with the AI, we would just feed that list into the prompt, and then the AI would already have a lot more data or a lot more information to work with, and thus it will make better decisions. However, there are also some problems with this approach. And to be exact, there are 3 problems with this approach. First of all, we can only feed a limited amount of examples into the prompt, because recent studies have shown that the sweet spot for the amount of examples that you should put into your AI prompts is about 5 or 10, or in some situations, maybe 15 or maybe 20. But after that, the results definitely start to degrade. So at one point, if you put more examples into the AI, the results are actually going to get worse. So we can only feed a limited amount of examples into this AI, which immediately causes another problem. And that is, if we can only feed a limited amount of examples into here, and every time we feed in the same examples, no matter what post we're analyzing here, then a lot of times most of these examples are not going to be that relevant to the post we're analyzing. And that directly leads to a third problem, which is that our prompts are going to get quite expensive. Because in order to maximize the chance that for any given post that we analyze, at least 1 or 2 of our examples are going to be somewhat relevant, we have to put in the maximum amount of examples that we can put into this prompt without degrading the output quality, which we talked about in problem number 1. So we have to really max it out, maybe put 15, 20, or maybe even 25 examples into the prompt every single time we analyze a post. But as you know, the more text you put into a prompt, the more expensive the prompt is going to be, which means our entire AI automation is going to get really expensive, which is also not really good. And that is why we will not use the second approach today, but instead we're going to use a third approach, which I call prompt plus relevant examples. The way this third approach works is that we're going to create an example database. And into this example database, we can put as many examples as we want. We can put hundreds of examples, thousands, tens of thousands of examples in here. It does not matter. And then what we do, whenever we analyze a new post, before sending the post to the AI, what we do is, first of all, we send the post to this example database. And then we tell the example database that it should return us the 5 or 6 most similar examples. So the example database looks at these posts and then looks at all of the examples and then determines which of these examples are the most similar to the post that we're analyzing. And then it returns us these 5 or 6 most similar examples. And then we take these examples and feed them into the prompt together with our original post. And this way, whenever we analyze a post, the examples are going to be extremely relevant and extremely good. And then when we analyze another post, let's say post number 2, we do the same thing. We feed post number 2 into the example database and tell it to return the most similar examples. And this time the example database might return completely different examples than what it returned for post number 1. So it'll return the most similar examples for this post number 2. And then we will feed post number 2 into the AI together with the most relevant examples for post number 2. This solves all of the 3 problems that we had previously. We no longer have the problem that we have a limited amount of examples because we can just put all of the examples that we have into our example database. It does not matter how many we have. So this problem immediately is solved. The second problem with the non-relevant examples is also solved because, first of all, if we can put as many examples as we want into our database, then we can create examples for all types of posts that we are going to analyze. So there's always going to be some relevant examples available. Also, we do not take all of these examples and put them into the prompt, but instead we choose individually for each post what the most relevant and the most similar examples are. So this problem also is solved. And number 3, the prompts are not going to be as expensive anymore because we only take 5 or 6 examples that we are going to put into the AI. So we do not need as many examples anymore because these examples are extremely good. And as you might know from your personal life, if you have a handful of really good examples, that's usually enough to work really effectively on a task. And the same thing applies here. A handful of good examples are going to be much better for the AI than hundreds or thousands of non-relevant examples. Now we're going to set up this example database together. And for that, we're going to use Airtable. And Airtable is essentially just a much more user-friendly version of Google Sheets. At least that's how I think about it. And the good thing is Airtable has a completely free plan that you can use. And this free plan has no time limit, and with that you can have 1,000 entries in your database, so 1,000 examples, which is going to be more than enough for most of you. So your task now is to quickly sign up for an Airtable account and then click through the sign up process. Once you've done that, you can click here on Home, and then here you can create new databases. And you can do that by clicking this Create button and then choose the option Build an app on your own. Then close this AI assistant and then give your database a name. I'm going to call this Reddit Insurance Marketing, and you call this database whatever you want. Then I double click on this table 1 name because I want to rename this table inside of this database and name it examples table. Perfect. Now I want you to select all of these columns here except for the first one while holding Shift, and then click on delete 5 fields. So you remove everything except for the first column. And then the first column, I'm going to double click on it and rename it to title. It's going to be the title of our example post. Then I add a new column, a long text, and I call this content. Then I add a third column. This is going to be a select column, a single select, and I call this suitable for reply, or you could also call it suitable for self-promotion. And then I add 2 options, yes and no. And let's also give them a nice color. Yes is green and no is red. And create the field. Then finally, I'll add another field. It's going to be a long text again. And this will be called explanation. Create the field, and this will contain the explanation why a certain post is suitable for reply, yes or no. And then just make sure to select all of these empty entries here and delete all selected records. Perfect. What we have to do now is we have to fill this Airtable database with examples. So we have to curate our own examples. And the big question is, how can we do that? The answer is quite simple. You just go to the subreddit that you chose in the beginning that you want to monitor for new posts that are suitable for self-promotion. In my case, this is this subreddit called expats, but you open up the subreddit that you chose in the beginning. And then you just search for some posts that might make for interesting examples. So I'm just going to search for insurance here. And then you can just scroll through here and look at what posts could make good examples. For example, this one here, in my case, health insurance questions for Mexico. That I think would make for a good example. So I copy this, paste it here inside of the title field. And then I also copy the content and paste the content here in the title field. Sorry, in the content field. Let's make this a little larger here so that we can always see the full title. If someone asks a health insurance question about Mexico and wants to and is asking what type of health insurance they should get, I think that is definitely suitable for a helpful reply with a little bit of self-promotion at the end, maybe a link to a blog article of my client, or maybe just a short mention that they offer free consulting. So suitable for reply is yes, and explanation, I would write a sentence like, the post asks a question about health insurance options in Mexico as an expat, which is something that our company can assist with. So that would be an explanation for this yes or no. And just like that, we have our first curated example. And now you just keep going. You just curate this table here with more examples. We're going to do one more together because I also want to show you a negative example. So let's search for insurance here again. For example, here's this post about car insurance. Someone writes, thinking of canceling my car insurance in the US. How easy would it be to get a new coverage later? This would be a great example for no, this is not suitable for self-promotion because my client does international health insurance and this is about local car insurance in the US. So that's not going to be relevant. Let's copy the title here, paste that here in a new row. Let's copy the content here, paste that here in the content. Now, as you can see right here, this post is quite long. So what I try to do, if there are very long posts, I try to delete some parts of it so that only the essence of that post remains. And then the AI has an easier time to work with that example. For example, here with this post, in the beginning, the person writes quick background. That is not going to be relevant. The post will make sense without that text. Also here, he mentions that since MAGA took over, I don't see myself going there. So he adds some political statement in here, but this is not really relevant for the insurance part that we're looking for. So I also delete that. Also here, it's not really that important that he co-rents in an apartment with his college buddy. So I can also delete that. And I think this PS where he rants about his current insurance is also not that relevant. So you can see I've shortened this example so that it only includes the very essence of what this post is about. And sometimes you can also do that with the title. You can see this title here is quite long. If I stretch this out, you can see, thinking of canceling my car insurance in the US, how easy would it be to get new coverage later? I think we can just safely remove that second part. And the title will still make sense. Thinking of canceling my car insurance in the US. And in this case, I choose suitable for reply no, because this is not relevant to the international health insurance offer that my client has. And for the explanation here, I would write something like, the user asks about local car insurance in the US, but our company only assists with international types of insurances, especially international health insurance. That's the explanation why this is not suitable for a reply with self-promotion. All right, and now your task is to fill up this example database with about 15 to 20 really good examples. You find these examples just how I showed you now. And make sure to get the most out of these examples, that you have at least a somewhat balanced amount of positive and negative examples. So examples that are labeled as yes and examples that are labeled as no should be somewhat balanced. That will maximize the results of the AI. And by the way, what you can also do, you can also invent examples yourself. If you have some very specific use cases in mind where you think it would be important to have some examples, you can just create imaginary posts yourself and then label them as yes or no and give an explanation for that. So that also works really well. Okay, I now went ahead and filled out this example database with some relevant examples that I curated, and I hope you have now done the same, because that is a requirement for the next steps of the automation. So what we're going to build next is we're going to build the mechanism that we can send a post to this example database, and then the example database sends us the most similar examples back. The problem is Airtable itself cannot do that. Airtable is an amazing user interface to manage these examples, to make changes, to add new ones, but it does not have this functionality that we can send some data in and have it send the most similar data back to us. And this is why we are now going to set up a synchronization between this Airtable database and a so-called vector database, because a vector database has this ability that you send something into it and it will compare all of its entries and send you back the most similar ones to what you put in. And vector database sounds really fancy, sounds really complicated, but in the next few minutes you're going to see that it's actually quite simple. All right, so for this I'm going to set up a new workflow, and here in this workflow I'm going to add a trigger, a schedule trigger, and I want to run this every day, because once per day I want this automation to look at all of our entries in Airtable if we've made any changes or if we have added new examples, and then synchronize them to our vector database. So I call this schedule trigger every day, and the trigger interval I set it to days, and the days between the triggers is 1. Then we need to add an Airtable node here, and please choose the action called search records, and I'm going to call this get new and edited examples. Then you have to connect a credential. If you haven't connected your Airtable account ever before, you click on here and then click on create new credential. And now we need to paste an access token here. And you get that access token from your Airtable database by clicking on your account symbol here, and then you click on Builder Hub. And here I want you to click on create new token. Then you have to give it a name, n8n connection or something. Doesn't really matter too much. And then you have to add a scope. This is basically what this token will be allowed to do. And here you just have to add 3 scopes: data records read, data records write, and schema basis read. You have to add all of these 3, otherwise it will not work. Then you can decide on the access of this token. Either if you want to reuse this for other automation, you can just add it to use all resources. Or if you don't want that, you can also choose a specific base here. And then you click on create token. Then copy the created token and click on done. And back in n8n, you just paste that in here and click on save. And now it says connection tested successfully. Perfect. Then you have to choose a base from Airtable. I'm going to choose the one that I just created, Reddit Insurance Marketing. And the table that I choose is the table we created called examples. We also have to add a filter. And for the filter, I want you to add this text here. Last modified time must be bigger than date add now minus 1 day. So copy this filter right here and paste it into this filter by formula field. And essentially what this does is it will then only return us the posts that have been created or that have been edited in the past 24 hours in the last day. And all other posts have already been handled by a previous execution of this automation because we run it once per day. Okay, let's execute this. And now you should get back all of the examples that you just curated because you have done this in the past day, in the past 24 hours. So you should get a response with all of your examples from this Airtable example database. Next, what we have to do is we have to add a loop here because we have to load these examples individually into our vector database. So I add a loop here and I call this loop over examples, and batch size I leave at 1. For each example, I'm going to first of all delete the old version of the example from the vector database, because let's say we have edited an example, then this will already exist in the database. So if we just added the new one, then we would have a duplicate. So this is why, first of all, we delete an old version in the vector database if it already exists, and then we save the new version of it. And to do that, I'm going to search for a node called Supabase, and I select Supabase, and then delete a row. Now the big question is, what is Supabase? Supabase is essentially just a backend provider, which means you can use this to quickly set up a database that also has the vector database functionality. So that's where we're going to sync our Airtable examples to, so that we can utilize this mechanism of vector databases, that it will return us always only the most similar examples. And the good thing is, if we go to pricing here, you can see Supabase also has a free plan that has no time limit. And this free plan is going to work really great for this use case. So your task now is to click on Start for free here, and then quickly create an account. And then click on Sign Up Now down here and quickly create an account. Once you have created your account and confirmed your email address, you can log into this account. And then you have to create an organization. So quickly fill out a name, Mike, n8n. In my case, type, let's call it personal, and the plan, we choose the free one, and we create the organization. Now here it sometimes says create new project, but then it says you don't have permission to create the new project. In this case, just cancel it and then reload this page here. And then you should be able to create the new project. Organization, you keep that, and then you give that project a name. I'm going to call this Reddit Marketing. We want Supabase to generate a password for us. Then you choose a region here and create the new project. Once you've created the project, I want you to go to this SQL editor. And here we now have to paste in some code to generate our vector database. And you get this code from this documentation page from Supabase, where it says LangChain. I'll put a link to that in the video description. And basically, this code, what this does, it enables the vector database functionality and automatically creates a database that is compatible with the n8n vector database nodes that we're going to use later. So let's paste that in here. And before you execute this, you have to make some changes. First of all, if you have already used Supabase in the past and you're not sure if you have executed this code here before, then after this create extension, you have to write if not exists. That is important, because if you have already executed this and this extension already exists, this code will not work. And then where it says vector 1536, please replace that with 1024. 1024. This is going to be the size of our vector later. And then before you click on run here, make sure that it does not say run selected. If it says that, then just click anywhere inside of this code to remove the selection and then click on run. And now you can see success, no rows returned. If you now go to the table editor in here, you can see there is a new table that has been created called documents. So click on it, and this is going to be our vector database. If you want to remove this unrestricted label, you can just click on RLS disabled here and then enable RLS for this table. Enable RLS. And now we have a vector database that we can work with that is also compatible with n8n's node. And if you don't 100% understand yet how this vector database works, in a few minutes after we've set up this synchronization, I'm going to show you exactly what the idea with this vector database is and what the functionality is. Now that we've created our Supabase vector database in our account, we have to connect it to n8n, and we can do that by clicking here and then create new credential. And we need two pieces of information, the host and a service role secret. So this is the API key. And we get that if we go to project settings and then click on data API. And there it says URL. And we copy this RESTful endpoint for querying and managing your database. This is what we need. Inside n8n, I paste that. And then I select the second option here called API keys. And then I go to API keys, create a new API key, create keys. And then I copy this API key and paste it where it says service role secret. And then I click on save. Connection tested successfully, so everything works as expected. Perfect. Okay. Let's keep going. Resource row operation delete, we leave that as is. For the table name, you choose documents. And the select type, I want you to choose string. That is really important. And then you have to enter a filter here. And the filter that you have to paste in here, you can just copy it again, looks like this. Metadata and then this double arrow, ID equals JSON.id. This is the filter. And basically what this does is it only deletes all of the entries in this vector database that have the same ID to the example that we are adding. So this means that not all examples in our vector database will be deleted, but only the ones that we will now, after this node, add into the database again. Because remember, this is the idea. We want to delete the old version of these examples and then load in the new ones. All right, we have to, inside of this node, also enable a setting. And this setting is always output data, because the problem with this node is that if it tries to delete an example that does not exist in the vector database yet, for example, if we've added a new example to Airtable, and as you might know, the way n8n works, if a node does not output data, the automation stops, and we do not want that. We want to continue after this node, even if it does not have any output data, which is why I turned this setting here, always output data, on. Okay, and then now we get to the interesting part. I'm going to search for a node called Supabase Vector Store. And I want to select the action add documents to vector store. Here we choose our credential that we just created, operation mode insert documents, And then the table name, in our case that is still documents. Embedding batch size, we can leave that as is. Now we have to add an embedding model here. And an embedding model is basically just a specialized AI model that has the task to take a piece of data, in our case the example, and turn it into a vector that we can then save into our vector database. And in a few minutes, I'm going to talk a little more detailed about what a vector in this context actually means. I'm going to choose Embeddings OpenAI, and from OpenAI, I'm going to select the model Text Embedding 3 Large. And for the options, I set an option called dimensions, and I select 1024 here. Remember, when we created this vector database with the piece of code, we changed it to 1024, so we also have to choose 1024 here as well. Next, we have to add a so-called document loader. So this is the node that will load the data into the vector database. Please choose the default data loader, leave the type of data as JSON, and the mode, we only want to load specific data. Text splitting, we change that to custom, and we want to add an option here called metadata. Now, with regards to the data, what goes into this field here? We have to fill this field with the data that we will later run our comparison against. So if we load a post into this vector database later to get out the most similar examples, this piece of data is what it will be compared with. So ideally, in this field here, I do not add things like the ID of the example or the time when it was created, because that has nothing to do with the actual content of the post. The only thing that I add in here is title, colon, and then content, colon. And then I just switch this field here to expression. And then I drag in the title up here from the examples database, and then the content down here. Then I add the metadata option. And here inside of the metadata, what I want to do is I want to add the entire post data now, so that later when we pull the most similar examples for each post from this vector database, that we not only get back this comparison data, but all of the example data, including our label with the yes and no and our explanation. So let's add a property. I'm going to start with the property ID. And I pull that in here. Then I add another property called title. I put that in here. Then I add another property called content. And I add that in here. Then one more called suitable for reply. I add that in here. And then also our explanation. Pull that in here. And we might as well just also add the created time in here. So in case we need it, that we can access this. So created time, we pull that in here as part of the metadata as well. And now all of the post data, it will be stored alongside this comparison data. Now, one more thing that we need to add is a text splitter. In this case, I want you to choose the token splitter and just set this to 5000. Let's complete the loop here so that after it loaded in the first example, it doesn't stop, but it continues with the loop. And then one more thing that we have to add in here before we can test this out, we have to add a limit node inside of here. And we have to limit the amount of items we let through here to 1. Because what can happen with this node right here is that if there are, for any reason, some duplicates in this vector database, this node will here delete all the duplicates, which is good. But the problem is it will then return multiple items for each duplicate that it has deleted. And this would mean the rest of the automation would execute multiple times, and thus it would just add the item as a duplicate, so multiple times again. Which is why here I add this limit node so that this is only executed once. And now we can execute this workflow to see what it does. And you can see it executes successfully 11 times because I have currently 11 examples in my example database and synchronizes them with our Supabase vector database. And because this automation will now run every day and check if there have been some edited examples or if there are new examples, this vector database will always be synchronized and be up to date with our examples database. Okay, now 2 more things that we have to do here. First of all, I recommend to you in this filter formula to change the -1 to -2. What this will mean that whenever this automation runs every day, it will not only check this Airtable database for the edited and new examples of the past day, but for the past 2 days. And that gives us some additional redundancy because all the examples are checked twice always. Which means if Airtable for some reason one day doesn't really work, I mean, this happens sometimes in rare cases that these online services have some connection issues or something like that, then on the next day it will try it again. And then the chance that this Airtable database will ever go out of sync with your vector database is really low. Also keep in mind that if you're on the free plan of the Supabase vector database, your vector database will be disabled after 7 days if it is not active. And this means if for 7 days you don't add any new examples into your Airtable examples table and you're on the free plan, then this vector database will be disabled, which is not good. To prevent that from happening, we can just duplicate this Airtable node here. And then we add another trigger. We add a schedule trigger here. And this will run every 6 days, a little faster than once every week. Let's call this every 6 days. And here, what we do is we just remove this filter. We disable this return all checkbox. And we set the limit here to 1. No matter if it has been edited or not, we will pull out one single example. So let's rename this to get one example. And then we will just update this single example in our vector database. And then this will prevent the vector database from being disabled. All right, let's have a look at the data inside our vector database. So I go to table editor and then to the documents table that we've created. And you can see our 11 examples have now been loaded into this vector database. First of all, the content. So remember, I said this is the data of the example that we are going to compare new posts against so that we get out the most similar ones. And then here we have the metadata, and this metadata includes all of our post data. So the title, the content, the explanation, and then the label suitable for reply, yes or no, alongside some additional metadata that n8n has added automatically. And then the really interesting part of this table is this column called embedding, where it says vector. And you can see there are lots of numbers in here. And this embedding or this vector is essentially just a long list of numbers that represents the meaning of this content here in a mathematical way. And the advantage of representing the meaning of text in a mathematical way is that we can run very easy calculations and comparisons based on that. If we have a look again at the sketch that I showed you in the beginning, what happens in the background in the vector database when we send the post to it is we will send the post, then the vector database will turn the post into the mathematical meaning of the content of the post, and then it will compare that mathematical meaning, so all these numbers, to the mathematical meaning of all of our examples. And this way it can calculate which of these examples are the most similar and can then only return us the most similar examples. So this is basically how a vector database works behind the scenes. Okay, and now you should not forget to save this and activate this workflow. Once you've activated it, make sure to set up some error notifications and things like that. I'm not going to do that now. This is not too difficult. You can just do this yourself. And now you can return to the original automation that we already started to build. And the rest of the setup is fairly simple. I'm going to delete this connection between the final classification, if a post is suitable for self-promotion, yes or no, and this filter here. And then pull this down here. And then what I'm going to add in between here is a loop node, because what we want to do now is for each post that we have here, let's delete all of these, because what we want to do now for each post that we have here, we want to individually pull out the most relevant examples from the vector database. And then once we pulled these examples out of the vector database, we're going to send them to our AI so that the AI has the most relevant examples and can make better decisions. Which is why I connect this done branch of the loop to the AI node. Let's maybe put that here. And down here, I'm going to connect the loop output to a node called Supabase Vector Store. And the action that we need here is get ranked documents from Vector Store. So that means we will now pull out the examples from the Vector Store ranked by similarity to the post that we put into it. So this is how this Supabase vector store node looks like. And for the embedding, we again have to choose our embeddings OpenAI model. And I choose text embedding 3 large again and make sure that we select the same dimension. In our case, that is 1024. And again, an embeddings AI model is just a specialized AI model that turns a piece of text into a vector, basically into a list of numbers, which represents the mathematical meaning of that piece of text. Table name, we again choose the documents table from our vector database in Supabase. And the prompt, this is going to be the data again that we want to run the comparison based on. To set this up, I quickly have to execute this workflow. And in this case, you can see the problem is none of the posts from the past 4 hours gets through this pre-filter, which is why for testing purposes, I'm going to just disable this. And if I now execute this again, you can see some posts will get to this loop and thus also to our Supabase vector database. All right, we now have to fill out this prompt. And remember previously when we stored the comparison data for the examples, we just wrote title and content, and then we chose the name of the title and content. So I'm going to do the same thing for the post as well that we now sent to the vector database. So I pull in the title from the post info step and the content from the post info step as well. And that's what we're going to compare all of our examples against to find the most similar examples. Limit, I set this to 50. Let's get the 50 most relevant examples out of here. We do want to include the metadata, so that is really important. And then let's also rename this to just vector DB maybe, or vector store. And I'm going to also add a note, get similar examples, and then we want to display the note in the flow. And now you can see below the name we have this note, similar examples, so it is much easier for us to see what's going on. Let's execute this again and then see what happens. And you can see this vector store now returns us 11 items. So it returned us all of the examples that we have in the vector database, up to a limit of 50. And the great thing is, it returns these examples already in a ranked or sorted way. That means the top example that it returns here is going to be the most similar example to the post that we're analyzing. And you can see that because it says score 0.57. This is a similarity score. A similarity score of 1 would mean that the post is basically the same as the example. If the similarity score is 0, this would mean the post is completely different from the example. And then you can see the second example only has a similarity score of 0.45, the third example 0.44, and then it goes lower and lower. All right, let's pull out the important data from this vector database response. I'm going to add a set node here again, and I call this ranked examples. And here I'm going to add, first of all, the post again, post.title, and then a field post.content. And then from the post info step, I pull in the post title and I pull in the post content. Then I will add a field called example.title. And from that, I pull in the response from the vector store, from the metadata, the title. And now you understand why we had to save the example to the metadata previously in our other synchronization automation, so that now we can pull out the entire post from the metadata. I add another field called example.content, and I pull out the content from the metadata. I add another post called example, and then square brackets, suitable for reply. The reason I use square brackets here and not dot like previously is because this field name has spaces in it. So that is the way to do it if a property has spaces. And I pull in suitable for reply. And then I add example.explanation. And I pull in this explanation from the metadata. And then obviously what we should not forget is the similarity score. So I pull this in here as well, drag it into this area, and then I rename this field to similarity. If you want, you can also multiply this similarity score by 100, and then it would represent the similarity percentage. I'm going to leave that as is. so that it's always between 0 and 1, and execute this. And now you can see we have all of the relevant data for each example. For each example, we can see which post was analyzed. Living in China is the post, and then the example, which we're comparing against, and then the similarity between the post and the example. The post living in China, the most relevant or similar example for that would be this post, will I ever be truly happy as an adult expat? And then as we go lower, the examples will be less and less relevant. All right, now we are almost done with our automation. We just have to add a few more simple steps. And the first one is going to be a code node. And this code node, I'm going to call this most similar examples. Mode, please set this to run once for all items, language, JavaScript, and then paste in the following piece of code. I'm going to show it to you so you can copy it. Paste in this piece of code. What this piece of code does is you don't have to understand it. The functionality is just that from all of the top examples that we pull out of our vector database, this code here will select the top 2 positive examples and the top 2 negative examples, so that we always have 2 examples labeled as yes and 2 examples labeled as no that we will then pass into the AI. So to make that clear, I go to settings and then select display node in flow and write 2 negative / 2 positive. And then we can see this here in the code node. If I now execute this, you can see out of these top examples that we pull from the vector database, in our case 11, we select the top 2 negative, the top 2 positive. So at the end, we're left with 4 examples that will be passed to the AI. The problem is these 4 examples here are individual items. And if we would just now pass these examples onto the AI directly, then for each example, this node here would execute once, and we do not want that. We only want to run it once for all of these 4 examples, which is why we have to add an aggregate node here. And I call this aggregate examples. So this basically just combines all of these 4 items into a single item. Aggregate all data into a single list. Output data, we call that examples. And we want to include all fields. And if I execute this, you can see we get an output of only 1 item, but this 1 item now contains a list which includes all of our 4 examples. And now all we have to do is we can close this loop here so that for each post that we pass in here, it will individually pull out these examples and then afterwards continue until we have for each post received the most relevant examples. And then I execute this so that we get data to this, access to this loop data here. And now inside of our prompt here, I'm going to make one very simple change. Instead of just feeding the post into it, I'm also going to write some examples that might help you. And then from the previous loop node, I just pull in this examples list as an expression here. The problem with that is that this examples list is just an array or just an object. And you can see if we pull that in, it just displays object, 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 object. So what we have to do now is we have to turn this object into readable text. And we can do that by wrapping it in a function called json.stringify parentheses. And then inside of these parentheses, we add this $json.examples again. And now we can see all of our examples listed down here. To make it a little more readable, after examples, I'm going to write comma, null, comma 2. And now you can see the examples are a little more readable, but still in a structured data format in JSON so that the AI can properly work with it. And if we now execute this, then we can see the automation properly executes. For each post that it gets passed into this loop, it pulls out the most relevant examples from our vector database, then turns them into one item, and then we feed this item, this list of examples, into the AI prompt together with the post, and then the AI will analyze the post together with the most relevant examples and give us an absolutely amazing result. And maybe this example setup that we did now with the vector database was a little more difficult than what you usually do in n8n. However, it is absolutely worth it because it just takes the results, the success rate from our AI from 80% to 98 or 99%, because we just can present it with exactly the examples that it needs. And now the core functionality of this automation is complete. We only have to add a final step here, and that is we now have to send a notification to ourselves if the AI decides that one of these posts, after looking at the post and the examples, if the AI decides that the post is suitable for self-promotion. So that is why here I'm now going to add a filter, and I'm going to call this suitable for self-promotion. And the condition for that is from our post classification data step that we set up previously. The AI evaluation suitable for reply is equal to yes. That's our condition. And if that condition is true, we can then send a notification to us. Now, you can decide to receive this notification on whatever platform you want. You could receive it on Discord. You could send yourself an email with that notification. It is completely up to you. But what I'm going to use is I'm going to use Telegram to receive this notification. Because Telegram, I always have that with me. It is completely free to use, and I can use it on the phone and also on my computer. And here in Telegram, I'm going to search for the send a text message action. Then you have to connect your Telegram account. I'm not going to show this in this video. If you're interested in that, I've already recorded an entire video on this channel previously. So you can watch that right now and then afterwards come back and continue with the next steps. So resource message operation send message. Here I have to add my chat ID, which in my case is this one right here. But you can see n8n also gives you the information that there is a Telegram bot that you can contact to find out your own chat ID. And then for the text, I'm going to use, first of all, turn this into an expression. And then I'm going to write, there is a new post, Reddit post suitable for self-promotion. Title. Then I pull in the title from the post info step. And then the link, so I can just open it and immediately leave a helpful reply with some self-promotion at the end. Post from the post info step, I pull in the link. That's why we configured this in the very beginning. And then I have to add some options here. First of all, parse mode, I set this to HTML. And then append n8n attribution, I disable this. And let's rename this to send notification. And let's, first of all, disable this step for testing purposes, because in our case, I think none of the posts that have been analyzed were suitable for self-promotion. So I'm going to disable this to simulate that some of them would have passed through this filter. In some cases, if you now test this, you will get an error message. In this case, just save the automation, reload your page, and then execute this entire automation again from scratch. Because sometimes n8n struggles with existing data and these disabled filters. But once you reload and then execute it again, it should work as expected. And you can see now we get a notification workflow executed successfully. And in Telegram, I get this message. There's a new Reddit post suitable for self-promotion, title, living in China. And then I get the link to it and I can click on it and open it to write the helpful reply. Now, a little trick that you can use for testing purposes, if you want to also see some posts that the AI will categorize as yes and not only no ones, then what you can do is you can enable these filters here again. And what you could do is you could just disable this first filter here, remove posts older than 4 hours. And in that case, all of the 100 latest posts would get analyzed. And in this case, you can see actually from the past 100 posts, only one was about insurance. But this post, apparently, as we could see, the AI said, well, let's have a look at the post. Relocating to Malaysia. The AI says, yes, this is suitable for reply because the user is an expat planning to move to Malaysia and explicitly mentions insurance in their budget and asks about healthcare costs. So they explicitly want to know something about insurance, which means this post will be suitable for a helpful reply with a little bit of self-promotion at the end. And if in your case, even this disabling of this first filter here does not get you any results where the AI says, yes, this is suitable for self-promotion. There's another thing that you can do. You can switch just for testing purposes this operation here from get many to search. Then you can search for a keyword. So for example, you search for insurance. And this way you could only pull out some insurance related posts. In my case, you obviously choose your own keyword here. And when you then execute this, I promise you, you will get a lot of posts that the AI will also classify as yes. And then after testing, make sure to switch this back to get many. And then you have to enable this filter again, category new posts, and then it will work properly again for your production automation. Now, a few things that I want to point out so that you get the maximum out of this automation. First of all, the really powerful aspect about this automation is that we can just manage all of our examples in this easy to use Airtable interface. And this way we can improve the AI step by step. So whenever the AI makes a mistake, we can add a new example for this type of mistake. And then in the future, the AI will not make that mistake again, which is really, really cool. Now, just very quickly, how do I analyze my own, for my own use case, for my own software? I do this Reddit AI automation as well. And here I've created another table in this Airtable database called analyzed posts. And this table is very similar to the examples. It also has a title, content, and then suitable for reply and an explanation. But it also has some additional fields like the post ID, a URL, and when this post was created. And basically what I store inside of here, I store the AI results. So if we look at the template that I mentioned in the beginning, again, link to that template in the video description, you can see after this evaluation data, I've added this additional note here before I filter out the ones that are not suitable for self-promotion. And I save all of the posts that this AI here analyzes to the second table in my Airtable database. And this way I can monitor what the AI is doing. So I can just look and see, okay, what did the AI analyze here and did it make any mistakes? And if it did make a mistake, I just take that analyzed post and add it as an example in my example database, then choose the correct label. So for example, instead of no, I choose yes, and then add an explanation for it. So this way the AI will not make that mistake again in the future. All right, now don't forget, if this entire setup, if you feel like this has too many moving parts or is too complex for you, then I've prepared this template that I mentioned in the beginning with this configuration note in the beginning. And here you just essentially have to change these placeholders for your own use case, and then everything should work as expected and you don't have to set up all of these nodes yourself. And the template also includes this other automation that synchronizes Airtable with your vector database. If you like this video, then please leave a like on this video so that I know that you want to see more videos like this in the future. And also don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right, thank you for tuning in. I wish you a great day. My name is Mike. Bye.